The war room of the Void Spike was silent, bathed in the cold silver-purple glow of tactical holoscreens. Commander Vorgul stood motionless, his armored carapace reflecting the harsh light of the displays, his 4 clawed hands clasped behind his back. The data streams flickered with casualty reports, fleet movements, and most troubling of all, the last known coordinates of the human battle group Iron Resolve. Gromnok, the Vorthak scientist, adjusted his neural interface with a twitch of his secondary limbs, mandibles clicking in unease. The humans should have broken by now, he murmured, more to himself than to Vorgul. Their losses are unsustainable, their ships are inferior, their weapons. Vorgul cut him off with a low, reverberating growl. You are thinking like a scientist, Gromnok, not a warrior. The scientist flinched, his violet ocular lenses dimming in submission. But Vorgul did not reprimand him further. Instead, he turned back to the holographic display, where the wreckage of 3 Vorthak dreadnoughts spun lazily in the void, their once impenetrable armor peeled open like the carapaces of dead insects. The humans had done that, not with superior firepower, not with overwhelming numbers, with ingenuity. Vorgul remembered the first time he had faced them, decades ago, when the Galactic Accord had dismissed humanity as a fractured, primitive species. Their ships had been slow, their weapons crude, but they had fought like nothing the Vorthak had ever encountered. They did not break, they did not surrender, and when cornered, they adapted. Now, as the Void Spike's long-range sensors picked up the faint energy signatures of the Iron Resolve, still operational, still moving, Vorgul felt something unfamiliar coil in his gut. Not the clean, sharp fear of battle, but the slow, gnawing certainty of a predator realizing it had stepped into a trap. Because the humans had not just survived this long, they had been waiting. And now, as the Vorthak armada closed in for the final assault, Vorgul wondered, what have they prepared for us? Section Fe. The Council's arrogance. The war room of the Void Spike was a brutalist masterpiece of Vorthak engineering, all sharp angles and cold gunmetal surfaces, lit by the eerie silver-purple glow of tactical holoscreens. Commander Vorgul stood motionless before the central display, his armored fingers tracing the flickering projection of the Iron Resolve. The human vessel was a scarred, asymmetrical beast, its hull pitted from countless battles, yet still radiating defiance in the form of flickering shield signatures and active weapon ports. Gromnok, the lead scientist, hissed through his mandibles as fresh data scrolled across the screen. Their power signatures. They shouldn't be possible. Their reactors were crippled in the last engagement. Vorgul didn't answer. His mind was elsewhere, decades back, to the first skirmish with the Terrans. The Galactic Council had laughed when the humans arrived in their jury, rigged warships, their railguns patched together from salvaged tech. They fight like animals, the High Matriarch had sneered. No discipline, no honor. They hadn't understood. Humanity didn't fight with honor. They fought to win. A memory surfaced an ambush in the Helix Nebula. Vorthak dreadnoughts had cornered a human cruiser, outgunning it 10-1. The humans should have died. Instead, they'd vented their own plasma conduits, turning their ship into a makeshift bomb, and took 3 Vorthak vessels with them in a fireball that lit the nebula for days. Gromnok interrupted his thoughts. Commander, their armor composition, it is changing. Adaptive nano-layering. Our scans can't lock onto a consistent weak point. Vorgul's claws flexed. Of course, the humans had learned. Every battle, every loss, they absorbed it, reforged themselves into something worse. The holoscreen flickered, zooming in on the Iron Resolve's ventral hull. Something pulsed there, a new structure, organic and mechanical in equal measure, throbbing with an unnatural rhythm. Gromnok's voice was barely a whisper. That is not in any of our databases. Vorgul knew. Then the humans hadn't just been waiting, they had been evolving, and the Vorthak armada was flying straight into their jaws. The war stories always started in the same place, a dim-lit cantina on the edge of Vorthak. Controlled space, where the air smelled of ionized metal and spilled coolant, and the walls bore the scars of 100 brawls. It was a place for soldiers, not politicians, a place where truth still mattered. Tonight, the bar was quieter than usual. The usual raucous laughter of mercenaries and off-duty legionnaires had been replaced by a tense silence. Word had spread. The Vorthak armada had engaged the humans again, and this time, something was different. Commander Vorgul stood near the back, his armored fingers wrapped around a glass of distilled Thark's venom, the drink untouched. His secondary eyelids flicked shut for a moment, replaying the battle in his mind, the way the human cruiser had moved, not like a ship, but like a predator circling wounded prey. Across the room, a grizzled Vorthak veteran named Krazak leaned heavily on the bar, his carapace riddled with old plasma burns. He had fought in the First War against the Terrans, back when the High Command still dismissed them as primitive. Now, his voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Young ones," he rasped, mandibles clicking in amusement as a group of fresh-faced warriors edged closer. "You think this is just another skirmish? You think the humans will break like the Sarathi did, or the Kelvor?" Krazak exhaled, the sound like grinding metal. "I served alongside them once, fought them too, and let me tell you, there is no creature in this galaxy more terrifying than a human who has decided you are the enemy." He tapped a claw against his drink, the violet liquid rippling. "You've heard of the Battle of Terran's Folly. The High Command calls it a tactical withdrawal. I call it the day we learned what humans do when you push them into a corner." His gaze darkened. They had one cruiser left, one, outnumbered, outgunned, shields failing. Standard doctrine says, you surrender. The humans, they jettisoned their own warp core and detonated it mid-retreat. Took out half our pursuit fleet and the survivors. They boarded our crippled ships, not with drones, not with mechs, with knives and sidearms in their bare hands. A young warrior scoffed. "That's just desperation. Any species can fight." When Krazak's tail lashed, cracking against the floor. "No, you don't understand. It wasn't desperation, it was calculation. They chose to die that way because they knew it would make us hesitate the next time, and it did." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl. "And now they've had decades to prepare, to study us, to adapt. That ship out there, the Iron Resolve, it's not just a warship, it's a message." Vorgul's grip tightened on his glass. He had seen the scans, the way the human vessel's armor shifted like living tissue, the way its weapon systems reconfigured mid-battle. Krazak's next words sent a chill through the room. "The humans have a saying, never start a fight, but always finish it." He drained his drink in one swift motion. "And mark my words, they are far from finished." Outside, the distant pulse of warship engines rumbled like thunder. The storm was coming. Section: Fey First Strike, First Mistake. The Vorthak battlecruiser Blade of Supremacy cut through the void, its silver-purple hull glinting under the distant starlight. Commander Vorgul stood on the command deck, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The human vessel, Iron Resolve, drifted alone in the dead zone between systems, an easy target. Gromnock, the lead scientist, adjusted the scanner array with meticulous precision. His violet ocular implants flickered as data streamed across his vision. "Energy signatures nominal," he reported. "No defensive formations. No reinforcements detected within 3 light minutes." Vorgul exhaled through his nasal slits. This was too simple. The humans had been reckless, venturing this deep into contested space without escort. A mistake, a fatal one. "Target their engines," Vorgul ordered. "Disable, but do not destroy. I want them alive to witness their failure." The Blade of Supremacy's weapon banks hummed to life, silver-purple energy coiling in the barrels, like serpents ready to strike. Then the humans moved. The iron resolve, supposedly a slow, lumbering fortress, spun on its axis with impossible speed. Its armor plates rippled, shifting from dull gray to an eerie reflective black. Gromnock's scanners shrieked in alarm. "Shields at no, that's not." His voice cracked. "Commander, their energy signature just vanished." Vorgul's crest flared in agitation. "Explain." Before Gromnock could respond, the iron resolve fired, not with plasma, not with railguns, with silence. A pulse of distorted gravity lanced out, invisible to the naked eye but devastating to sensors. The blade of supremacist systems flickered, screens dissolving into static. Alarms warbled, then died as if strangled. Vorgul snarled, slamming a fist into the console. Evasive maneuvers. Now, the human ship unfolded. Hidden compartments slid open along its flanks, revealing rows of sleek needle-like drones. They launched in perfect unison, spiraling through the void with predatory grace. Gromnock's voice was hollow. They let us see them. They wanted us to attack. The drones struck, not at the hull, not at the engines, at the crew. Vorthak warriors collapsed mid-stride, their armor untouched but their nervous systems screaming. Bioelectric disruptors, weapons the Vorthak had never encountered, never even imagined, ripped through their bodies like lightning. On the Iron Resolve's bridge, Major Diana Harriman watched the carnage unfold with cold detachment. Beside her, Corporal Evan Kim adjusted his targeting display, fingers dancing across the hologrid. "Direct hits on all decks," he confirmed. "Neural overload in progress. They won't be firing back." Harriman nodded once. "Good. Send the message." A single transmission pulsed from the human ship, not a demand for surrender, not a boast of victory, just 5 words, repeated in the Vorthak battle tongue. "You should have stayed away." Then the Iron Resolve turned its guns on the Blade of Supremacy's engines and left them drifting, powerless. In the dark, Vorgul stared at the dying consoles, his claws digging into the command chair. Krazak's warning echoed in his skull. They are far from finished. And now neither were the Vorthak. The Blade of Supremacy drifted in the void, its silver-purple hull flickering with dying energy discharges. Inside, the air tasted of scorched metal and ionized plasma. Vorgul's secondary heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of fury and disbelief. His claws flexed against the command console, leaving deep gouges in the dark steel. He had expected a battle. He had not expected this. The humans had not simply defeated them. They had humiliated them. Their weapons had bypassed Vorthak's shielding, like it was nothing. Their tactics had been surgical, precise, as if they had studied Vorthak doctrine for decades. And then they had left them alive. A deliberate insult, a message. Gromnock, the ship's chief scientist, staggered onto the bridge. His violet-ridged faceplate cracked from a fall. His voice was a rasp, his vocal sacs still recovering from the neural disruptors. "The engines are dead. Comms are dead. Life support is failing." Vorgul did not respond. His gaze was locked on the tactical display, or what remained of it. The holographic projection flickered, showing the last known position of the human warship. Not retreating, not hiding, Gromnock followed his stare, then hissed in realization. "They're not done." Vorgul's spines bristled. Of course they weren't. The humans had not unleashed their full arsenal. They had not needed to, and that was the most terrifying part. On the Iron Resolve, Major Diana Harriman stood before the war table, her reflection distorted in its polished black surface. The holographic display showed the crippled Vorthak vessel, its energy signature fading to a dull ember. Corporal Evan Kim stood at attention beside her, his fingers twitching, an old habit from his neural interface days. "Orders, Major?" Harriman exhaled slowly. The Vorthak had come expecting monsters. They had found something worse. "Activate the beacon." Kim hesitated. "The old protocols. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. They wanted a war. Let's show them what that really means. Deep within the iron resolve, a signal pulsed into the void. Not a distress call, not a warning. The Vorthak sensors detected it first. A ripple in subspace, a distortion that shouldn't exist. Gromnock's claws trembled as he adjusted the failing scanners. Something's coming. Vorgul snarled. More human ships? No. Gromnock's voice was hollow. Not ships. The void shivered. Then the ghosts arrived, dozens of them. Hundreds, warships. But not like the Iron Resolve. These were older, far older. Their hulls were scarred, their designs archaic by modern standards. Some bore the insignia of long-dead Terran factions, their names etched in languages not spoken for centuries. Yet their weapons were active, their reactors hummed with power, and they moved wrong, jerking, flickering, as if reality itself struggled to contain them. Vorgul's blood ran cold. These were not just ships, they were memories. The humans had not just preserved their old warships, they had awakened them. Gromnock's voice was barely a whisper. They're bringing their dead to fight for them. Vorgul's claws dug deeper into the console. Provoke had been right. The humans were far from finished. And now, neither were their ghosts. The void became a graveyard of living steel. Vorgul's tactical display flickered under the weight of the impossible. The spectral fleet did not move like ships. They lurched, vanishing and reappearing in stuttering bursts of displaced reality. Their engines screaming in frequencies that made the Vorthak's armor vibrate like struck glass. Gromnock's claws trembled over the sensor array. They're not just reactivated relics, they're enhanced. The data stream confirmed it. The ancient Terran vessels pulsed with modifications no civilization should have dared to make. Their reactor signatures bled exotic radiation, chronal distortions, the telltale shimmer of temporal engineering. Their weapons, once crude by galactic standards, now crackled with energies that bent light into spirals of violet decay. And then the first salvo hit, a battleship older than the Vorthak's recorded history. A blocky, angular brute of blackened armor fired its main battery. The projectile was no mere kinetic round. It unfolded mid-flight, splitting into a storm of self-guiding shards that phased through shields like smoke through a sieve. Vorgul's flagship shuddered as the fragments embedded themselves in the hull, and then detonated, not with fire, but with a soundless rupture of localized gravity wells. Entire decks collapsed inward, screaming metal crushed into singularities the size of a fist. Evasive. Vorgul's order died as another ghost. Ship flickered into existence inside their formation, its rust-pitted prow scraping against a cruiser's flank. For a heartbeat, the two vessels existed in the same space. Then the Terran relic solidified, and 3,000 tons of durasteel sheared through the Vorthak ship like a blade through wet paper. Gromnock's voice was raw. They're not bound by physics, not anymore. Vorgul understood now. This wasn't just resurrection, it was vengeance. The humans had taken their fallen warships, relics of forgotten wars, heroes of dead causes, and given them new teeth. They had hollowed out their hulls and filled them with horrors, reactors that burned with stolen time, guns that fired the echoes of dead stars, navigation systems that followed the scent of old blood in the dark. And they were learning. Every engagement, every exchange of fire, the Ghost Fleet adapted. Their targeting systems, once sluggish, now anticipated Vorthak maneuvers with eerie precision. Their shields flickered with stolen harmonics, mirroring the enemy's own frequencies. A new alert screamed across the bridge. One of the spectral vessels, a dagger-shaped destroyer with a hull pocked by centuries of battle, had locked onto the flagship's engine array. Its weapons glowed a sickly silver, purple, a mockery of Vorthak technology repurposed into something monstrous. Vorgul braced, and then the iron resolve struck. The Terran flagship plunged into the fray like a wolf among ghosts, its modern armor gleaming amidst the ancient fleet. Its guns spoke in thunder, not whispers. its missiles trailing fire instead of fractured time. For the first time, the spectral ships hesitated, not in fear, in recognition. The dead knew their own. And as the iron resolve carved a path through the chaos, Vorgul saw the truth. This was not a battle, it was a hunt, and the ghosts were hurting them. The dead did not scream. That was the first thing Vorgul noticed as the battle raged. The spectral ships moved in eerie silence, their weapons discharging in bursts of silver-purple energy that left no sound, no thunder, only the cold, creeping dread of inevitability. The Vorthak fleet, once proud and unbreakable, now fractured under the assault of vessels that should not exist, ships that had died centuries ago, their hulls still bearing the scars of their final battles. And yet, the Terrans recognized them. The iron resolve did not falter. It cut through the spectral formation like a blade through smoke, its guns roaring where the dead whispered. Every shot it fired was precise, deliberate, not just striking the enemy, but remembering them. The Terran targeting systems locked onto weak points that no living Vorthak had ever recorded, striking reactor conduits that had been obsolete for generations, severing power relays that had long since been redesigned. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, his mind racing. The dead ships were phantoms, remnants of a war fought before the Terrans had even breached their own atmosphere. And yet, the humans fought them as if they had faced them 1,000 times before. Then he saw it. A flicker in the Iron Resolve's data feed, an old insignia, barely visible beneath layers of fresh paint. A symbol from a war so ancient, even the Vorthak archive spoke of it only in hushed tones. The First Contact War, the realization struck him like a plasma round to the chest. These were not just ghosts, they were human ghosts. Gromnock's analysis confirmed it moments later. The spectral fleet's energy signatures matched no known Vorthak design, but they did match something else, something older. These are Terran ships, the scientist hissed, his voice trembling. But not from their current fleet. These are relics. They're dead. Vorgul's blood ran cold. The First Contact War had been a slaughter. The Vorthak had descended upon Earth's early colonies like a storm, confident that these primitive apes would break beneath their might. They had been wrong. Humanity had fought back with everything they had. Improvised weapons, stolen tech, brutal guerrilla tactics that turned entire worlds into graveyards. They had lost, yes, but they had made the Vorthak bleed for every inch, and now, centuries later, the echoes of that war had returned. Not as history, not as ghosts, but as vengeance. Major Diana Harriman stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her hands steady on the tactical display. She did not flinch as the spectral ship swarmed closer. She did not hesitate because she knew them. Every scar on their hulls, every weakness in their design, every last, desperate tactic they had used when the Vorthak had come to burn their homes. "Major," Corporal Kim said quietly from beside her, "they're not just attacking, they're hurting us." She nodded. The dead were not mindless. They were angry, and they remembered exactly who had killed them. Vorgul watched in dawning horror as the spectral fleet tightened its formation, driving the Vorthak ships toward a single point in the void, a graveyard of broken hulls and shattered armor. A battlefield, their battlefield, the place where the First Contact War had ended, where the Terrans had made their last stand, where the Vorthak had thought they had won. The dead had not come to fight, they had come to finish it, and as the Iron Resolve moved to join them, its guns blazing alongside the ghosts of the past, Vorgul understood one terrible truth: the Terrans did not forget, and they did not forgive. Section Fey, the Admiral's nightmare. The void between stars was never truly silent. Vorgul knew this. He had spent decades listening to the whispers of cosmic radiation, the faint hum of distant pulsars, the occasional shriek of a dying ship venting atmosphere into the abyss. But this was different. This was memory. The spectral fleet moved with eerie precision, their silver-purple energy signatures flickering like dying stars. Their hulls were not whole. Great gashes split their armor, exposing skeletal ribs of shattered support beams and gutted weapon mounts. Yet they advanced, their engines burning with the same relentless fury they had shown in life, and at their center, the iron resolve. Not a ghost, not yet. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne as the tactical display updated. The dead were hurting them, just as Kim had said, just as Harriman had known they would. The realization settled into his bones like ice. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Gromnock's hands trembled over the sensor array. The readings made no sense. The energy signatures matched Vorthak military frequencies, but the patterns were wrong, too sharp, too alive, and then he saw it. The first spectral cruiser passed through the wreckage of a fallen Vorthak dreadnought, one of the very ships that had died here decades ago, in the final hours of the First Contact War. As the ghostly vessel glided through the twisted metal, something changed. The wreckage moved. Not much, just a shudder, a tremor. But it was enough. Gromnock's breath caught in his throat as the dreadnought's shattered hull twisted, as if something inside it were waking up. A single gun turret, rusted and broken, rotated. Harriman watched the tactical feed with grim satisfaction. She had known, not the specifics, not the how, not the why, but she had known. Every Terran veteran did. The dead did not rest easy. Not when their killers still breathed, not when their war was left unfinished. The iron resolve shuddered as another volley of plasma fire raked its shields. Alarms blared. Damage reports flickered across secondary screens. She ignored them. They didn't matter. Not anymore, because ahead of them, the void itself was changing. The wreckage of the First Contact War, the graveyard where so many Terrans had died, was stirring. And the dead were not alone. Vorgul's comms officer let out a strangled sound. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. Vorgul's spines flattened. From where? The officer hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, from everywhere. The bridge fell silent as the transmission played. Not one voice, a chorus of whispers, of screams, of last words, and final curses, all overlapping, all merging into a single, terrible sound. And beneath it all, Vorgul's blood turned to ice. The dead were talking, and they were laughing. Kim's fingers tightened around the firing controls. He had seen the reports, heard the stories. But this was something else. The wreckage wasn't just moving. It was reforming. Broken hulls shuddered as if pulled by invisible strings. Shattered armor plates shifted, grinding against each other, fusing together in jagged, unnatural ways. Kim's breath caught as the thing in the graveyard opened its eyes, and the void screamed. Vorgul understood. Then the Terrans had not just come back to fight. They had come back to show them. To show the galaxy what happened when you pushed humanity too far. When you made them angry. When you made them remember. The dead were rising, and they had brought hell with them. The void between stars was never silent. Vorgul had learned that truth long ago, standing on the observation decks of Vorthak dreadnoughts, listening to the hum of silver-purple plasma conduits, the whisper of cosmic radiation against reinforced hulls. But this was different. The dead ships groaned. Not the mechanical protests of stressed metal, but something deeper, something organic. The sound vibrated through the bones of his crew, through the armored plates of his command throne, through the very fabric of space itself. Gromnock's claws trembled over the sensor array. The scientist's crest, normally rigid with disciplined focus, had flattened against his skull in primal terror. His voice, when it came, was a rasp of disbelief. They're not just rebuilding the wrecks. Vorgul already knew, the humans weren't salvaging. They were resurrecting. Kim's hands were steady on the controls, but his pulse hammered in his throat. The Indomitable's tactical display flickered with impossible readings, energy signatures flaring where there should have been none. Heat blooms in the frozen carcasses of ships long dead. And then the first one moved. A Terran heavy cruiser, its spine shattered in some forgotten battle, its hull pockmarked with the scars of 100 plasma burns. Its engines had been dark for decades. Now, they ignited. Not the clean blue, white of human fusion drives, but something else, a deep, pulsing crimson, like embers stoked back to life. The cruiser's broken frame shuddered, its shattered prow lifting as if pulled by invisible hands. Armor plates rippled, molten seams knitting together in jagged scars. Kim had seen the schematics, knew the firepower these ships had once carried. But the weapons that unfolded from the cruiser's flanks were wrong. They pulsed with the same unnatural light, their barrels twisting like living tissue, their targeting arrays glowing with a sentient hunger. Major Harriman's voice crackled over the comms, calm and terrible. They remember. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. The Vorthak had waged war for millennia. They had crushed empires beneath their boots, reduced worlds to cinders, built their civilization on the bones of lesser species. They knew the art of death. This was something beyond death. The human wrecks weren't just being repaired, they were being remade, and they were angry. A destroyer, half its midsection blown open, dragged itself forward on jets of burning plasma, its shattered keel trailing debris like blood. A carrier, its flight decks collapsed inward, unfolded jagged spines of blackened metal, each one crackling with violet energy, and at the center of it all, the indomitable, its hull still scarred from battle, its weapons humming with barely restrained fury. Vorgul understood. Then the humans had not just come to fight. They had come to teach, to show the galaxy the price of waking the dead. Gromnock's voice was hollow. They're ships. They're not machines. Not anymore. Vorgul didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written across the void, in the shuddering rebirth of Terran steel, in the way the wreckage twisted itself back into something new, something worse. The humans had always been relentless. Now, they were inevitable, and the galaxy would learn. The hard way, the void between stars had never felt so heavy. Vorgul stood in the dim glow of the Stormfang's command nexus, his talons flexing against the cold metal of the tactical display. The holographic projections flickered with the last known positions of the human fleet, or what remained of it. The data was hours old, outdated, useless, because the humans didn't follow the rules of war. They rewrote them. Gromnock's words echoed in his mind, a ghostly whisper beneath the hum of failing systems. They're ships. They're not machines. Not anymore. Vorgul had seen it firsthand. The way the Indomitable had risen from its own wreckage, its shattered hull knitting together with strands of blackened alloy, its weapon systems growing new barrels, like the regenerating limbs of some deep-sea predator. The humans had built their vessels to adapt, to survive. And now, they were coming. The tactical display flickered again, this time with a fresh alert, a single contact, burning hard toward the Stormfang's position. No transponder, no identification, just a silhouette that made Vorgul's secondary heart stutter. A Terran dropship, not one of the sleek angular models the Vorthak intelligence files had described. This was something older, something worse. Its hull was pitted with ancient battle scars, its thrusters belching blackened plasma, like the breath of a dying beast, and painted across its nose, barely visible beneath layers of soot and carbon scoring, was a single word. Gromnock let out a choked sound, his spines flattening against his skull. That's, I know. Vorgul growled. The Resurgent was a legend, a relic from the first expansion wars, a ship that had been decommissioned, no executed, by the Terran High Command after it had gone rogue during the siege of Epsilon Ice. The record said it had been scuttled, burned in the atmosphere of some nameless moon, yet here it was. The dropship didn't hail them, didn't demand surrender. It simply arrived, slamming into the Stormfang's dorsal docking clamps, with enough force to buckle the armor. The impact sent tremors through the deck, and Vorgul felt his stomach lurch as the ship's gravity compensators struggled to compensate. Then came the sound, a slow, grinding screech as something Someone cut through the airlock doors, not with plasma torches or breaching charges. With claws, the doors exploded inward, and she stepped through. Major Diana Harriman. Her armor was a patchwork of salvaged plating, the original ceramite long since replaced with jagged segments of Vorthak battle steel. Her helmet was gone, revealing a face that should have been dead 100 times over, pale skin stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes like chips of flint, a scar running from her temple to her jaw in a brutal, unbroken line. Behind her, half hidden in the smoke, stood Corporal Evan Kim. His left arm was gone below the elbow, replaced by a crude prosthetic grafted directly into the bone. His right hand clutched a weapon Vorgul didn't recognize, a rifle with a barrel that pulsed like a living thing, its surface crawling with biomechanical tendrils. Harriman didn't speak. Not at first. She just looked at them, her gaze lingering on Vorgul's insignia, on Gromnock's trembling hands. Then finally she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You should have listened," she said, her voice like rusted metal grinding together. "The galaxy warned you." Vorgul's translator struggled with the next words. "Never provoke Terran veterans." Kim's weapon hummed to life. They ignored it. The war ended not with a grand armistice, but with silence. The Vorthak armada, once a sprawling tide of silver-purple dread, lay broken across the void. Their ships, brutal, angular things of dark steel and violet energy cores, drifted in shattered pieces, their hulls split open like the carcasses of butchered beasts. The humans had not just defeated them, they had dismantled them, methodically, surgically, with the cold precision of a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of violence. Vorgul stood in the ruins of his command deck, his carapace cracked, his blood, thick and iridescent, pooling at his feet. The air stank of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the remnants of his fleet's last, desperate volley. It had not been enough. Nothing had been enough. Across from him, Major Diana Harriman waited. She was not alone. Corporal Evan Kim stood at her side, his biomechanical rifle still humming, its tendrils twitching like a predator scenting blood. Behind them, the shadows moved, figures in scarred armor, faces hidden behind visors pitted from 100 battles. Veterans, the ones the galaxy had warned the Vorthak about. Harriman exhaled, long and slow, as if savoring the moment. Then she stepped forward, her boots crunching over shattered glass and warped alloy. "You fought well," she said, her voice a rasp of ruined vocal cords. For a species that thought war was just numbers and firepower, Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He wanted to spit defiance, to roar one last challenge, but his body refused. His limbs were leaden, his mind sluggish from blood loss. He had seen the reports, the after-action scans. The humans had not just outmaneuvered them, they had out-thought them. Every Vorthak tactic, every strategy, had been anticipated, countered, then turned against them with brutal efficiency. Gromnock, the scientist, whimpered from where he crouched near a sparking console. His claws trembled as they hovered over the wreckage of his scanners. "Your weapons, your technology," he choked out. "It makes no sense. The energy signatures, the adaptability." Kim tilted his head. "We don't build weapons," he said, his voice eerily calm. "We build answers." Harriman's smile returned, thin and lethal. "You came here thinking you'd teach us our place, that we were just another species to be crushed under your boot." She gestured to the corpses around them. Vorthak warriors, their carapaces ruptured, their weapons still clutched in death. Grips. "Now you know." A silence stretched, thick with the weight of realization. The humans had not won because they were stronger, or faster, or even more advanced. They had won because they remembered. Every war, every defeat, every scar. They carried it all, not as baggage, but as fuel. And when pushed, they did not just fight back, they evolved. Vorgul's vision blurred. He thought of the stories, the whispers from the outer rim. Never provoke Terran veterans. Now he understood. Harriman turned, her coat tattered and stained, billowing behind her as she strode toward the exit. The other veterans fell in behind her, a silent procession of living ghosts. Kim lingered just long enough to meet Vorgul's gaze. "Tell the rest of them," he said softly. "Tell them what happens when you ignore the warning." Then he was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the wreckage of an empire's pride. Behind Section Fey, the silence in the command bunker was absolute. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his chair, the dark steel groaning under the pressure. The holographic display before him flickered, its silver-purple energy cores casting jagged shadows across the chamber. The battle data scrolled endlessly. Loss reports, casualty counts, fleet positions reduced to smoldering debris fields. They had lost, not just a skirmish, not just a battle, an entire war. And the humans had done it with scraps. Gromnock stood motionless beside him, his violet ocular implants cycling through rapid calculations, his biomechanical tendrils twitching in distress. The scientist had spent decades studying human warfare, their tactics, their psychology. He had warned the High Command. They had not listened. Now, the proof lay scattered across the star system, twisted wrecks of Vorthak dreadnoughts, their brutal utilitarian designs rendered into grotesque sculptures of defeat. The humans had not just broken their ships, they had humiliated their doctrine. Vorgul's mandibles clenched. The answer pulsed in the air like a phantom. The humans had learned. Every engagement, every skirmish, every failed assault. They had absorbed it all, dissected it, weaponized it. Their ships moved with a precision that defied logic, their formations shifting like a living organism. Their weapons, crude by Vorthak standards, had been refined into surgical instruments of annihilation. And then there were the veterans, Harriman. They had not just fought, they had taught. Vorgul's mind reeled at the realization the humans had not been improvising. They had been executing. A symphony of destruction composed from centuries of blood and fire. Gromnock finally spoke, his voice a hollow rasp. They adapted. A simple statement, a devastating truth. The Vorthak had waged war with the arrogance of a species that had never known true defeat. Their technology was superior, their discipline unmatched, their fleets untouchable, but the humans, they had survived. And survival, it seemed, was the deadliest teacher of all. Outside the bunker, the distant thunder of orbital bombardment rumbled, human guns finishing what their boarding parties had started. The fortress bunkers, designed to withstand siege for decades, had fallen in hours, because the humans had not just breached them, they had remembered how. Vorgul exhaled, his carapace heavy with the weight of failure. The High Command would demand answers, excuses, blame, but there was only one truth. The galaxy had warned them, never provoke Terran veterans, and now the Vorthak would carry that lesson into history, etched in fire, written in blood. The humans had not just won, they had taught, and the cost of ignoring that lesson was annihilation. Epilogue: the silence after the storm. The wreckage of the Vorthak fortress smoldered under the bruised sky its once imposing spires reduced to skeletal fingers clawing at the heavens. The air smelled of ionized metal and scorched earth, the aftermath of a battle that had rewritten the rules of war. Vorgul's surviving officers gathered in the ruins, their carapaces dulled by ash, their spines no longer rigid with pride, but slumped in exhaustion. They had expected to fight soldiers. Instead, they had fought memory. A human dropship descended through the smoke, its engines a low predatory hum. The ramp lowered, and a single figure emerged, not in the battle-scarred armor of the exotroopers, but in the unadorned black of a Terran envoy. The humans had sent no conqueror. They had sent a historian. The envoy stepped forward, a data slate in hand, its surface etched with the sigils of 100 human wars. No demands, no gloating, just a record, a chronicle of every siege, every last stand, every desperate innovation humanity had ever forged in the crucible of extinction. Vorgul took it, his claws trembling. The slate was heavier than it should have been. The envoy spoke only once. "You should have studied us before you challenged us." Then the humans left, no occupation, no chains, just the wreckage, the silence, and the weight of a lesson learned too late. Across the galaxy, the Vorthak High Command would debate, rage, and vow retaliation. But in that ruined bunker, among the shattered remnants of their invincibility, the survivors knew the truth. The humans had not come to rule, they had come to remind, and now, the galaxy would never forget.